Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. It was a little after 3 in the morning, and I was dead tired. I worked security at a warehouse just outside of town, nothing fancy, just overnight shifts watching mostly nothing happen. I usually rotated between a couple of buildings, but that night I was covering for a guy over in Building C. It was an older structure, mostly used for storage now. Dim lighting, drafty hallways, one flickering exit sign that maintenance never got around to fixing. You know the type. There were 5 cameras total, all wired up to a little monitor behind the front desk. I checked them every hour or so just to keep myself from dozing off. No alarms, no motion sensors, just me walking laps and glancing at a screen that rarely changed. I'd done my usual patrol around 2:45. Walked the perimeter, checked the locks, passed through the back loading bay, which was always the creepiest part of the building. Huge empty space, high ceilings, and the kind of silence that made your own footsteps sound too loud. There was a utility closet in the far back corner, but it didn't lock, and it was always empty. I looked in out of habit, swept my flashlight around, nothing out of the ordinary. Just boxes, a mop bucket, maybe some cobwebs. Back at the desk, I poured myself some gas station coffee and sat down to do my 3 a.m. camera check. I tapped through the feeds like I always did. Front doors, main hallway, loading bay, break room, and back corner. I froze on that last one. There was a man standing in the back corner of the loading bay, right in front of the utility closet. He wasn't moving. Just standing there. Not turned toward the camera either, he was angled slightly away, like he'd just stepped out from the closet and paused. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there. I leaned forward and squinted at the screen. Grainy footage, black and white, but it was definitely a person. Tall, thin, hands at his sides. His clothes looked normal, I guess. Couldn't make out any details. No reflective vest, no company badge, no hard hat. I stared at the timestamp. 3:02. 10 minutes ago, I was right there. That spot was empty. I had looked. I had opened the damn closet. I got up slowly and went to double check the main door. Still locked, deadbolt in place. Same with the side entrance. That only left the bay door in the back, but it was too heavy to open quietly, and I'd have heard it. Plus, the control box was inside, by the forklift. No way to open it from the outside without tripping the power. I went back to the monitor. The guy hadn't moved. Still standing in that same weird position. I waited, thinking maybe the feed was frozen, but the seconds kept ticking. I tapped the camera view. Nothing changed. I didn't know what to do. Part of me thought maybe it was a glitch, like maybe the feed was lagging and showing old footage. But that didn't make sense either. We didn't have cloud storage or anything like that, just live feed, no backup. I checked the other cameras. All fine. Break room was empty. Hallway still. Front doors untouched. I switched back to the loading bay. Gone. Just like that, he wasn't there anymore. My stomach dropped. I tapped back and forth between the feeds, hoping to catch him walking somewhere, but nothing. No sign of movement. I stared at that empty corner for a long time, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I noticed something. The mop bucket had moved. Before, it was inside the closet. Now it was out by the wall, maybe 3 or 4 feet from where it had been. I remembered exactly how it looked when I walked past earlier. I'd even kicked a bit of the mop head to the side because it was sticking out. I pulled my flashlight off the belt and just stood there at the desk, not sure what to do. I didn't want to go back there. Every part of me was screaming not to. But I also knew that if someone really was in the building, I had to check. I didn't carry a weapon, just a radio and a mag light. Protocol was to call the supervisor if anything seemed suspicious, but it was a skeleton crew that night, and my phone barely had service in that building. I decided to walk the hallway first, real slow. Kept checking over my shoulder. Everything was quiet. No footsteps, no voices. The break room light was still off, fridge humming like always. When I got to the edge of the loading bay, I clicked the flashlight on and took a breath before stepping in. It felt colder than before. Maybe I imagined that. The metal walls echoed even the softest sounds of my boots, the creak of the bay door frame, the little metallic rattle of my keys. I swept the flashlight across the space. No one. But the mop bucket was definitely in a different spot now. Closer to the middle of the floor. I didn't hear anything moving, but my skin was crawling. I walked slowly toward the utility closet, listening, shining the light through the cracked door. Empty. No signs of anyone. No smell, no sounds, no shifting shadows. I backed up, trying to keep every part of the room in view at once, which obviously wasn't possible. That's when I noticed something else. One of the side windows, high up near the ceiling, was cracked open. That made no sense. They were usually sealed shut, and you'd need a ladder to reach them. No ladder was there. No crates stacked nearby. Just a narrow window pushed out just enough for a hand to fit through. Back at the desk, I locked every internal door I could from the control panel. Then I sat down and watched the monitors. For the next hour, nothing moved. No man. No mop. No sound. At 4:11, I saw a flicker on camera 2, the hallway feed. A brief blur by the corner, too fast to identify. I rewound it and watched it frame by frame. It looked like a shoulder and the back of a head, just passing by. Wrong direction too, headed toward the front lobby, which I had locked. I bolted up and ran to the main doors. Still locked. But the floor mat was crooked, like someone had stepped on it in a hurry. I hadn't touched it since I came in. That was enough. I called the supervisor, told him there might have been a break-in, and asked for backup. He said it'd take at least 40 minutes to get there. I didn't wait. I left everything, even the flashlight. Just walked straight out, got in my car, and drove without looking back. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about the job. I drove to a gas station a few miles away and sat in the lot under the lights until the sun came up. When I came back later that morning with the supervisor and another guard, we searched the whole building top to bottom. Nothing was missing. Nothing broken. The cameras had been reset, no footage saved, no way to prove what I'd seen. The mop bucket was back in the closet. The only thing they found was a dusty footprint on the windowsill in the loading bay, where someone had pushed off to climb up. One footprint. No fingerprints. No ladder. Just that print and a faint smudge on the wall below it. Like someone had hoisted themselves straight up. I have no idea how. I quit a week later. Didn't give a reason. They didn't ask. It was a Tuesday, close to the end of a long week for me. I worked the night shift at this 24-hour diner just off the highway, well, Technically it used to be 24 hours, but ever since the staffing shortage, we'd started closing at midnight. Most people had gotten the memo, but a few regulars would still try to come in past hours. Usually we'd just wave them off. Most didn't make a fuss. That night was slow. We hadn't had more than 5 customers the whole shift, and I was the only one out front. Kitchen guy left at 10, and it was just me and the manager in the office after that. He barely left the back room unless something broke or the cops were called, which was rare. Around 10:30, this guy named Dennis came in. He'd been coming in for months, always ordered the same thing, coffee, black, and a grilled cheese. Never talked much. Kind of greasy hair, pale, always wearing this brown Carhartt jacket with stains on it. He'd sit in the far corner booth and just stare. Sometimes at the wall, sometimes out the window, sometimes at me. He never did anything weird enough to get kicked out. Just enough to make you keep an eye on him. I brought him his coffee and sandwich. He nodded like he always did, didn't say anything. I went back to wiping down the counter. I remember glancing up at the clock, 11:27. I started getting the mop bucket ready, figuring I'd do a quick run of the floor before locking up. By 11:45, every other customer was gone. Lights in the back half of the diner were already off. I kept the front ones on while I cleaned, partly so the place didn't feel dead, partly because I didn't like being alone in a dark building with someone still inside. Dennis hadn't touched his food. The coffee was half gone, though. He was just sitting there, both hands flat on the table, looking straight ahead. Not at the window. Not at me. Just ahead, like he was watching something that wasn't there. I asked if he needed anything else. He didn't answer. Didn't even blink. Just kept staring. I felt this weird tightness in my chest. Like I'd interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. I told him we were closing in 10. He didn't move. I walked away, pretending I didn't notice. I didn't want to start anything. Figured I'd let the manager deal with him. I knocked on the office door and said, "Hey, Dennis isn't leaving. Can you come out?" He groaned from behind the door. "Give him another 5, then tell him again. If he doesn't go, I'll come out." So I did. I finished mopping, wiped down a few tables, tried not to keep looking at Dennis. But I kept catching myself. Something about the way he was just frozen there. It wasn't normal stillness, it was too stiff. His head didn't move, not even a little. Most people fidget or blink or stretch. He didn't. At 12:03, I walked over to him again. "Hey man," I said, not too loud, trying to sound chill. "We're closed. You good to head out?" He turned his head, slow and stiff, and looked right at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. He stared for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, then looked back at the wall. I stood there for a beat, then turned and went back toward the kitchen. That was it for me. I told the manager, "He's not leaving. You deal with it." The manager finally came out, rubbing his eyes, looking annoyed. He walked over and stood by Dennis's table. I stayed behind the counter. "Sir, we're closed," he said. "You need to leave now." Dennis didn't move. "You can't stay here." "Let's go." Still nothing. Then, finally, Dennis said, without looking up, "I'll leave when she leaves." Manager looked at me, confused. "She's staff. She's closing up." Dennis didn't respond. "All right, man, I'm not playing games. Let's go." He reached out, tapped the table. That's when Dennis stood up. Fast. too fast for how still he'd been. He didn't say anything else. Just walked straight out the front door without looking at either of us. We both stood there for a minute, watching the door swing shut behind him. The manager muttered something like, "Freak," and went back to the office. I locked the front door behind Dennis and started turning off lights. I just wanted to be out of there. I don't know what made me do it, but after turning off the sign out front, I walked back to the window near the booth Dennis always sat at. The parking lot was mostly empty, just my car and the manager's. But Dennis wasn't in his truck. He didn't drive. That's the thing. I realized I'd never actually seen a vehicle with him. He always just appeared. I figured he lived nearby, maybe in one of the trailers up the road. But that night, I didn't see anyone walking away. The lot was dead still. No footsteps, no sound. Just the streetlight humming overhead. I stared for maybe a full minute. Nothing moved. Back inside, I grabbed my bag and went to the back door. We were supposed to leave together, so I waited for the manager to finish counting the drawer. He was taking forever. I stood near the back exit, looking out the little window in the door. It opened into a fenced-in delivery alley. Usually empty. But someone was standing at the corner of the fence, just where the light didn't quite reach. Not moving. Not trying to come closer. Just standing there. It was too far to see clearly through the dirty glass, but I could make out the shape of a man. Arms at his sides. Facing the door. I stepped back. My stomach dropped. I told the manager, "Someone's out back." He came over, looked, and squinted. "You sure?" "Yeah." He opened the door a crack and stuck his head out. Gone. Just gone. No footsteps, no rustling. Nobody there. He stepped outside, looked around. Nobody here. I didn't follow. I waited inside with the door halfway open. He came back in after a minute and shrugged. Probably just some junkie. We locked up and left together. I didn't say anything, just got in my car and waited for him to drive off first. He waved and pulled out. I waited 30 seconds, then backed out too. On the drive home, I kept checking my rear view. No cars behind me. Nothing weird. But I couldn't stop picturing Dennis's face. The way he stared straight ahead. The way he stood up so fast. I never saw him again after that. He just stopped coming in. No one else at work mentioned him again, either. Like we all silently agreed not to talk about it. I switched to mornings a couple weeks later. I couldn't do the nights anymore. Not after that. Even now, when I'm driving late and past that diner, I won't look in the windows. I don't want to know who's still sitting at that corner booth. I work nights at a research lab just outside town. Not anything top secret or exciting. We tested water samples for contaminants, mostly for the county. Real boring stuff. I was just a data tech. Basically, I ran reports, cleaned up logs, filed things into the system. Night shift was mostly paperwork and double-checking test results the day crew logged. The lab was open 24/7, but the night shift was just one person at a time. Cheaper that way, and we didn't get a lot of visitors at 3 in the morning. The building was tucked behind a strip of medical offices, way out past the last bus stop. No foot traffic, no neighbors. Just us and the empty parking lots. You needed a key card to get in, and the front door had a video intercom in case someone forgot theirs. It hardly ever buzzed. I think I used it once during training when I forgot my badge in the car. It was a Tuesday night. Real quiet. I remember it was raining, that cold drizzle that just hangs in the air and gets under your collar no matter what you're wearing. I got in around 10:30, scanned my badge, turned on the hallway lights, started the coffee machine. Same routine every time. I always did a walkthrough of the labs before settling in, just to make sure everything was where it should be. Never found anything weird before. That night, everything looked fine. Lights off in most rooms, equipment powered down, doors locked. I remember the sound of my boots on the tile echoing a little louder than usual. Guess the rain outside made it feel quieter indoors. Kind of dead. I went back to my desk in the control room, a small windowless office with 4 monitors and a bunch of file drawers. Around 2:50 a.m., I was checking some old logs when the intercom buzzer went off. That sharp buzz made me jump a little. First time I heard it in weeks. I switched to the door cam feed. There was a man standing under the awning. Hood up, dark jacket, backpack slung over one shoulder. Couldn't see his face too well. He leaned toward the camera and pressed the buzzer again. I hit the speaker button. "Yeah. Hey," he said. His voice was clear, calm. "I work here. I left my badge at home. Can you let me in?" I didn't answer right away. "Which department?" "Chem analysis," he said. "Night audit." That didn't make sense. There was no chem audit crew at night. Just me. Everyone else worked during the day. I didn't say that, though. I just stared at the monitor, trying to get a better look at his face. He looked young. Mid-20s, maybe. Pale. His hood shadowed most of his features, but he wasn't soaking wet, which bugged me. It had been raining for hours, and the awning only covered the door. His sleeves looked dry. So did his backpack. "I haven't seen you before," I said. "I'm new," he replied, fast. "Started last week. They told me I could use the intercom if I forgot my badge." Something about his tone was too casual, like he was reciting a line. I switched mics off and pulled up the employee directory. There was no new hire listed under chem analysis. Last onboarding was 3 weeks ago, and that guy worked afternoons. I turned the mic back on. "What's your name?" There was a long pause. Then, "Eric." "Just Eric. No last name." I asked, "Eric who?" Static. He didn't answer. He stepped a little closer to the camera, but not into the light. He tilted his head like he was trying to see past the lens and into the building. "I left my badge," he said again, quieter this time. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. He stood there for maybe another 30 seconds, then turned around and walked out of frame. I waited. He didn't come back. I figured he was just some guy trying to get in, maybe for shelter, maybe for something worse. Sometimes drifters would pass through and try doors. Never had one use the intercom before, though. I watched the front cam for 10 minutes. Nothing. Then I checked the other feeds. We had 6 cameras total: main entrance, side delivery door, back lot, hallway A, hallway B, and the server room. All of them were clear. I went back to my reports. At 3:16, the front door buzzed again. I jumped a little harder this time. I hit the camera feed. No one was there. I watched for a solid minute. Empty. Just the wet sidewalk and the red glow from the exit sign above the door. I checked the side door cam. Still nothing. I didn't touch the mic. After a while, I muted the buzz and went back to the hallway feeds. Everything looked the same. Then I noticed something weird. In hallway B, the door to the janitor's closet was slightly open. I was almost sure it hadn't been before. I'd walked past it at the start of my shift. It's one of those doors that sticks unless you really yank it. I flipped back to the footage from earlier in the night. The door had definitely been shut at 10:41 when I passed it. No one else had a keycard for the night shift. Just me. I got up and walked to the hallway with the closet. My hand was sweaty on the bat, and we're supposed to carry not a weapon, more of a safety thing in case of animals or someone passed out in the back lot. The hallway was dead silent. I walked past lab 2, then 3. Stopped at the closet. The door was open about 3 inches. I listened. Nothing. No breathing, no movement. I knocked once on the door frame. Hello? Nothing. I nudged the door open with the baton and flicked on the light. Empty. Just the mop bucket, shelf of paper towels, bottles of cleaner. Nothing looked out of place. I closed the door and yanked it to make sure it latched. Walked back to the control room faster than I meant to. Once I sat back down, I checked the door cams again. Still empty. Then I clicked the server room cam. He was standing there. Same guy, same backpack, same hood. In the server room. Not moving. His face was still shadowed. He had his back to the server rack, hands at his sides, just staring at the camera. I don't even know how he knew where it was. It's in the corner of the ceiling. I froze. That door had a keypad lock. No key card, just a 6-digit code. Only 5 people had it. And he wasn't one of them. I picked up the desk phone, called the manager. Straight to voicemail. Tried security dispatch. No answer. Probably asleep. I pulled up the server room feed again. He was gone. I switched to hallway B. He was standing outside the janitor's closet, facing the door I just checked. I locked the control room door. Not that it would stop anything. It was a thin wooden door with a keyhole you could pop with a pen. I watched the monitor. He didn't move. Not for minutes. Just stood there, like he was waiting for me to come back. Then he walked slowly out of frame. I checked every other cam. Empty. I didn't know where he was. I couldn't hear anything. Just that heavy, awful silence. I waited until I saw motion again on the back lot cam. He walked across it, still slow, still calm, like he didn't care if I saw him. He walked straight toward the tree line and disappeared into the dark. I stayed locked in that room until the sun started coming up. When the day crew showed up, I let them in, called the manager, filed a report. We pulled the footage and called the cops. They said they'd look into it. They never found anything. No sign of forced entry. No name Eric in any system. The keypad code was still the same. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing broken. I quit a week later. Got a job at a warehouse in town. It's loud and crowded and has a security guard at the door every night. I haven't worked alone since. It was a little after 11 p.m. when I first noticed the car. I worked overnight at a small call center, just one floor in a quiet office building, nothing fancy. There were only 2 of us on the night shift, but the other guy, Caleb, called out that week, so I was alone for 3 nights. The place ran mostly on autopilot overnight, just a few calls from customers in different time zones, nothing urgent. The office had a big front window that faced the street, and there was this tiny lobby downstairs with locked glass doors. You could see everything from the break room upstairs, which is where I kept going to refill my coffee. That's where I saw the car the first time. It was parked across the street, no lights on, just idling. A black sedan, maybe a Honda or Nissan. Looked older, like early 2000s. Kind of beat up. Nothing super weird about it at first. Just odd that it was running, and no one got out. I figured someone was waiting on a ride or food or something. I didn't think too much about it until I looked out again around 11:45 and it was still there. Same spot. Engine still running. No movement. It's a dead street at night, one way in, one way out. No bars, no stores, just other small offices that all shut down by 6. No reason to hang out there. I started getting that low, buzzing feeling in my gut. I walked away from the window and tried to focus on the screen, but every 20 minutes or so, I'd get up and check. Same car. Lights off. Still idling. I couldn't see inside because the windows were tinted pretty dark. At 1 a.m., I opened the window a crack and leaned out to listen. Sure enough, I could hear the low hum of the engine. That steady little putt-putt sound you only notice when everything else is quiet. Still no movement. No one opened the door. No dome light. Nothing. It was cold out. Mid-January. No snow, but low 30s, and the wind kept picking up in these sharp little bursts. I kept thinking, if someone was waiting in there with no heat, they'd be shivering. If they had the heat on, why just sit there in the dark? By 2 a.m., I couldn't concentrate on my work anymore. I kept switching tabs and glancing at the hallway like I expected someone to come in. I'd already locked the front door behind me at the start of the shift, just like always, but I double-checked it anyway. Then I turned off the break room lights so I could look out the window without being seen. The car was still there. But now the passenger side window was halfway down. Still no visible movement, but that change, just that one thing, made my chest feel tight. I don't know how to explain it, but that window being down made it feel less random. Like someone wanted a better line of sight, or they were listening for something. I leaned as close to the blinds as I could and squinted, but it was too dark. I could just barely make out a shape in the driver's seat. Could have been someone sitting still, or just a coat draped over the seat. Around 2:30, I called non-emergency dispatch. Just said there was a suspicious vehicle outside my building, had been running for over 3 hours, and I didn't know if someone needed help or what. The lady said she'd send someone to check. 20 minutes passed. I kept watching. I didn't see a cruiser. The car didn't move. I called again. They said someone had driven by and reported nothing unusual. I asked if they actually got out to look. She said she'd put in another request, but it might be a while. I started thinking maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe someone was just sleeping in their car, and I was overreacting. Then at 3:10, I went to the window again. The car was gone. No sound, no movement, no headlights. It had just vanished. I didn't hear it leave. I stood there for a while, looking up and down the street. Totally empty. I felt kind of stupid then. Figured maybe it had left earlier and I hadn't noticed. I went back to my desk and tried to focus on my screen again. At 3:42, I heard the building's front door click. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. Just a soft metal clunk, like someone testing the handle. The kind of sound you only notice when you're already on edge. I froze. Didn't breathe for a second. Then it clicked again. Our front door is thick glass with a deadbolt. You need a keycard or someone to buzz you in. There's a camera feed pointed at it, too, so I tabbed over to the monitor. The camera was black. Just a blank screen. All the others were working: the side exit, back lot, the hallway cams. Just the front feed was out. I stood up, grabbed the flashlight we kept by the fire exit, and crept toward the stairwell. I didn't hear anything else for a while. Just my own footsteps on the carpet and the wind tapping the windows. When I got to the landing, I crouched low and peeked through the vertical window in the stairwell door. The lobby downstairs was empty. I waited a minute, then opened the stairwell door as quietly as I could and walked down, one slow step at a time. My shoes made this dull rubbery squeak that felt way too loud. I reached the bottom and looked through the glass lobby doors. The black sedan was parked outside again. Same spot. Engine off now. My stomach dropped. This time, there was no mistaking it. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. Head turned just slightly toward the building. Not all the way, just enough to make it obvious they were looking at the door. I didn't move. I stayed crouched behind the wall near the entryway, barely breathing. Then I saw the passenger side door open. Slowly, a boot hit the pavement. A figure stepped out. Hood up, hands in their jacket pockets. They walked around the front of the car and crossed the street, straight toward the building. I backed up into the stairwell and pulled the door shut, then ran up 2 flights without even thinking. I didn't go back to the office. I ducked into the server closet at the end of the hall, squeezed behind the filing cabinet, and killed the flashlight. I could barely hear over my heartbeat. A minute or 2 passed. Then I heard the front door rattle again. Harder this time. Not just a test. Someone was pulling on it. Then a pause. Then a knock. 3 slow knocks. Then nothing. A few minutes later, I heard the door to the stairwell open. I clamped my hand over my mouth. Whoever it was had gotten inside. Either they had a badge or someone else had let them in. But there was no one else. I knew that. Footsteps came up the stairs. Steady, not rushed. Just one set. They reached the landing. Then I heard them walking slowly down the hallway. They stopped. Right outside the server room door. They didn't knock. They didn't say anything. I sat there for what felt like hours, knees cramping, hands shaking. Then finally, I heard the footsteps again, retreating. Down the hall. Down the stairs. Then silence. After 10 more minutes, I peeked out. The hallway was empty. I went back to the window in the break room. The car was gone again. The front cam started working an hour later. Just came back on by itself. I left at 6 a.m. sharp, locked everything behind me, and drove straight to my manager's house. Didn't even call first. I told her everything. She pulled the logs. There was no keycard swipe at the front door after mine. No system errors either. But when we checked the stairwell cam, it had 5 minutes of static around 3:45 a.m. same time I heard the footsteps. They replaced all the locks and disabled remote access after that. I switched to a daytime role the next week. I still don't know who it was, or what they wanted, but I don't park on empty streets anymore. I used to work at this 24-hour pharmacy a few years back, mostly doing night shifts from 10 to 6. It wasn't exciting, but it paid all right and let me keep to myself. Most nights were quiet, just the usual stuff. A few regulars picking up prescriptions, the occasional drunk guy looking for chips, that kind of thing. The store backed up to this alley, and every night around 2 a.m., I'd take the trash out through the back door. There was a big dumpster tucked against the wall, and I always made it quick, dump the bags, let the door shut behind me, and go back inside. That particular week, I was working alone. The girl I usually shared shifts with had quit suddenly, no notice, just stopped showing up. Manager didn't seem surprised. Said she got spooked but wouldn't say by what. Tuesday night was when I first noticed the chair. I went out back like usual, bags in both hands, and saw something off to the side near the dumpster. It was this old metal folding chair, rusted, kind of bent in the middle. Looked like something someone dragged out of a garage. I figured maybe the daytime stock crew left it there on a break or something. Didn't think too much of it until I got closer. The chair wasn't just sitting there randomly. It was angled perfectly toward the back door. Like, directly lined up with it. Like someone had been sitting there, just watching it. There were cigarette butts all around the legs. A lot of them. Some crushed out, some still kind of intact. A few looked fresh, still smelled faintly like smoke. That bugged me a little. It's not exactly a busy alley. There's no reason for anyone to hang out back there unless they work at the store, and I knew for a fact nobody else had been outside all night. I dragged the dumpster lid open, dumped the bags, and went back inside fast. Locked the door behind me. Next night, I checked the camera that points out back before taking the trash out. It's this crappy black and white feed with no audio, but it runs all night. I scanned through it, looking for anyone out there the night before, but nothing. No movement. Not even me taking the trash out, which was weird. Like it had glitched or something during that time. Wednesday night, the chair was still there. Same position. But there were more butts on the ground. Same brand, those camel blues with the gold stripe. I checked with my manager the next morning, asked if anyone on day shift smoked out back. He shook his head. Said they don't let anyone take breaks there because of some past theft issue. Supposedly the back area is off limits for staff unless it's for trash runs. I didn't take the trash out Thursday night. Just let it pile up in the mop closet. I figured I'd do it in the morning with the sun up. But around 3:10, the back door rattled. Just once. I was standing behind the counter, scanning in a new shipment, and it was dead quiet in the store. When I heard it, I froze. It wasn't loud, just a little shake, like someone trying the handle. Not yanking on it or anything. Just testing. I walked back there slowly, heart pounding, and checked the security monitor. The feed was black again. Not frozen. Just off. I didn't open the door. I just stood there a few feet away and waited. Whoever was on the other side never knocked. Never spoke. After a few minutes, I went back to the front and stayed there until the sun came up. Friday night, I went out back during daylight before my shift started. The chair had been moved. Still near the dumpster, but now closer to the door, maybe 4 feet away instead of 8. Still pointed straight at it. And now there were 2 fresh butts on the ground. Still warm when I crouched and hovered my hand over one of them. I started keeping a box cutter in my pocket after that. Saturday night, just after 2:30, the doorbell buzzed. We don't get many customers that late, so I looked up at the monitor. No one at the front. Buzzed again. I looked at the screen for the back door. The feed was working. There was a man standing there. Just standing, facing the door, hands in the pockets of a hoodie. I couldn't see his face clearly because the camera's angle is wide and a little grainy. But he was tall. Maybe 6 feet. Average build. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle, just stood there, waiting. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a bit. Then he stepped back, turned around, and sat down in the chair, right in front of the door. Just leaned back like he was settling in. I watched him for about 10 minutes. He didn't look around or mess with his phone. Just sat there, still. Then I pulled out my phone and called the police. Told them a man was hanging out behind the store, refusing to leave. They said they'd send someone. 10 more minutes passed. The guy didn't move. I thought maybe he left a bag or something, or was planning to sleep there. I kept watching the screen. Eventually a cruiser pulled up. I saw the headlights sweep across the alley. By the time the cop reached the back, the chair was empty. The cop checked around the dumpster, shined a flashlight, knocked on the back door to let me know it was clear. I asked if he saw anyone walking off. He said no. The alley doesn't have a lot of exits. There's a gate at the far end that stays chained. No way he got out of sight that fast. Sunday morning, after my shift, I went out back one last time. The chair was gone. But in its place, there was a single cigarette butt, standing upright in the middle of where the chair had been, balanced perfectly on the filter. I quit that job that week. Didn't even wait for my next paycheck. I didn't want to be around if whoever that was came back and decided to stop watching and actually come inside. It was a Friday night, just past 11:30, when I noticed Dan's car was still out in the lot. He usually left by 11, right when the second shift wrapped. I remember glancing through the break room window while I heated up the crappy burrito I always brought, and seeing his little blue hatchback still sitting there, same spot he always parked. It stood out because Dan was always on the dot. Not the type to hang around. Quiet guy. Didn't talk much, but he was reliable. Never once left late unless he told someone. I figured maybe he stayed over for some overtime, but we weren't that busy that night. Warehouse was running smooth, orders were light. About an hour passed. I was scanning barcodes in the dry stock aisle when I realized I hadn't heard him on the radio. Everyone has to check in every 30, and his voice never came through. I flipped mine to his channel and called his name. Nothing. Just the usual soft hum of static. I tried again, louder. Still nothing. I didn't think anything of it yet. Maybe his battery died, or he forgot it in his locker. Wouldn't be the first time someone left it charging on the hook. But I got this weird sense like something was off. Not a dramatic thing. Just a kind of pause in my brain. Like a mental stutter. I walked back to the break room. Our lockers were in the corner near the old vending machine nobody used anymore. His was cracked open. Not wide, just a few inches. Enough to see his jacket hanging up, his lunchbox still sitting on the shelf inside. Radio was there too, in the little charging cradle on the side, lit up green like it was full. That stopped me for a second. He wouldn't leave without grabbing that stuff. He smoked a lot, always took his jacket even if it wasn't cold. His phone wasn't in there either, which meant he had it on him, but I'd already tried calling. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I checked the schedule taped to the wall. He was supposed to clock out at 11, just like I thought. At this point I figured maybe he was helping with something in one of the bays and just forgot the time. I headed down to the loading dock area, where most of the overnight receiving happens, but the lights were dim and nobody was back there. I walked the aisles. Checked the packing stations. Even called out for him a couple times. All I heard was the sound of fans spinning and a few distant forklifts from the far side. I asked the shift lead if he'd seen Dan. He just shrugged and said, "Didn't he clock out already?" "No," I said, "his car's still out there." He gave me this weird half frown and said, "That's odd. Thought I saw him leave earlier." That didn't sit right. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. I started looking in places I hadn't checked: the upstairs break room, the front office, the back bathrooms. No sign of him. I finally went outside to walk around the lot. His car was still there. Windows up, doors locked. Nothing weird inside, just the usual mess. I looked around the lot but didn't see anyone else. Everything felt too still. The lights above flickered now and then, but that was normal. We had a busted ballast in one of them. It was past 1 o'clock when I got that tight feeling in my chest. Not panic, just this cold, crawling sense that I was missing something important. I went back inside and checked the camera feed from the security room. I don't technically have access, but the room's never locked, and the monitors are always on. The feed loops between areas: dock, aisles, break room, front entry, parking lot. I rewound the front door cam. Saw Dan walking just after 2 p.m., same as always. Fast forward. He moved around a little, went to his usual stations. Then around 10:45, the footage got weird. He walked toward the back exit near the supply closet. That door's barely used. No one ever goes out that way unless they're dumping broken pallets. But he turned down that hallway and never came back on any other camera. I kept watching. No motion on the supply closet cam after that. Nobody went in or out. I backed it up, paused frame by frame. He was alone in the shot, walking down the hall. Then the frame glitched a little, just some pixel smearing, probably nothing, and he stepped out of view. I stared at that hallway feed for maybe 5 minutes straight. It just kept looping. Empty. I decided to walk down there myself. Took the back corridor, the one where the lights buzz overhead and the walls are still painted that gross yellow from decades ago. I passed the old lockers we don't use anymore and kept walking until I hit the supply closet. Door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I opened it. Empty. Just shelves of gloves, shrink wrap, tape guns. Some broken stuff in the corner. I looked around, confused. No other doors, no trap doors or anything, just concrete walls. But something had been moved. One of the tape gun boxes was on the floor, like it had been knocked off the shelf. It wasn't dusty like the others, and the edge was crumpled a little, like someone stepped on it. I bent down to move it and saw something wedged behind the shelf, a half-crushed cigarette butt. Dan smoked menthols. I remembered because he always left the wrappers in the outside ashtray. There's no smoking allowed inside. He wouldn't have lit up in the supply room. I left the closet and walked a full loop of the building. Didn't see anyone. Checked the restroom stalls, the janitor closet, even under some of the workbenches. I ended up back in the break room, just kind of standing there. Everything felt too quiet. Even the background hum of the lights felt different, like it was pressing in. I almost didn't hear my phone buzz in my pocket. It was a text. Unknown number. No contact name. It just said, "You should go home." I stared at it, like maybe it wasn't real. I replied, "Who is this?" No answer. I checked the camera feed again. The back hallway now showed movement. A person walking through the frame. Not Dan. This guy was taller, older maybe. Wearing a hood pulled up, hands in his pockets. He moved slow, like he was listening for something. He paused right at the supply closet, turned his head toward the camera. Didn't look at it, just tilted his head in that direction. Then the feed cut out. I laughed. I didn't clock out, didn't tell anyone. I just walked straight to my car, keys already in my hand. As I got in, I looked around one last time and saw someone standing at the far edge of the lot, in the shadows near the fence. Could have been anyone, but they weren't moving. I started the engine and drove. Dan never came back to work. They filed a missing persons report the next morning. Said he never went home that night. Never picked up his paycheck either. His car sat in that lot for a week before they towed it. I was working overnight at a small electronics store just outside the city. We didn't get customers past 9 p.m., so from then until 6 a.m., it was just me, cleaning, restocking, and doing inventory. Management didn't want to pay for a full security service, so they had this old camera system and a silent alarm by the front entrance. If someone opened the door without unlocking it first, it would send a little ping to the system, not loud, just a flashing red light on the office monitor and a timestamp log. It wasn't unusual for it to glitch. Sometimes a gust of wind or a bird could make it blink on the log even though the door never actually opened. So I didn't really care when it first went off. I was in the back organizing HDMI cables and the little red light just flashed once, quiet and fast. I glanced at it, kept working. Then it did it again, 20 minutes later. Still not a big deal, but when it happened a third time about 10 minutes after that, I figured I should at least check the door. It was locked, like it should have been. I even tugged on it to make sure. Nobody in sight. Just the empty parking lot and the flickering streetlight across the road. I went back to the storage area and didn't think much of it. Another false alarm. Could have been anything, the wind, a shift in temperature, whatever. But then, right around 2:40 a.m., the alarm pinged again. This time, the camera system lagged for a second and then blinked like it was refreshing. I didn't even walk to the door that time. I just sat down in the little office behind the customer service desk and pulled up the camera feeds to rewind and check the past few minutes. That's when I noticed something weird. On the footage from 2 minutes before, the camera pointed at the front door flickered for a second, just a split second of static, and then I saw what looked like a foot, like someone's shoe, right up against the bottom corner of the glass. But it didn't move. It was just the toe of a sneaker, barely visible. Like someone standing right up against the door, maybe crouching. I rewound it again and let it play slower. Sure enough, right at 2:38, there was a flicker, and then the edge of a shoe appeared at the bottom left of the screen, like the person was squatting just outside of the camera's main field of view. Just enough to avoid being seen, except for that one little part of their shoe. And then, slowly, the shoe slid backward, like whoever it was had backed away on purpose, trying not to be seen. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. It creeped me out, but I also started second-guessing myself. The camera angle was wide and the footage wasn't great. I told myself it could have been a trick of the light or something sitting on the ground. Still, I walked back over to the door and looked around again. Nothing. Street was quiet. I checked under the bushes out front, even walked around the building. Nobody. Then at 3:12 a.m., it happened again. Same thing, silent alarm flashes, camera glitches for a second. This time, I jumped straight to the footage. Rewound just a couple minutes and slowed it down. And this time, the shoe was clearer. Definitely a sneaker. Black or dark gray. But more than that, I saw something else. Just for one frame, I'm talking literally one single frame, there was an eye. You know the thin gap between the bottom of the door and the floor outside? Like an inch or two at most. There was someone crouched down, close enough that I saw one wide, staring eye peeking up through that tiny gap. Right into the store. I froze. I actually felt myself go cold. I watched that section of footage over and over, pausing it frame by frame until I found it again. One wide open eye, probably inches from the ground, looking up from underneath the door. I wanted to call someone, but I wasn't sure what to say. Someone's crouching at the door sounds crazy when you say it out loud. And nothing technically happened yet. So I went to the back, locked the office door, and stayed there for a while. Lights off. Just watching the cameras. My shift was supposed to end at 6, and I figured I could just wait it out. Around 3:30, I heard something. It was faint. A tapping noise. Not knocking, tapping. Super light, like someone gently rapping their nails or a coin against the glass door. I muted the camera monitor and leaned toward the hallway. I couldn't hear it from the office with the door closed, but when I opened it just a crack, I could hear the faint tap 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 from the front of the store. I stood there listening for maybe a minute before it stopped. Then everything was dead quiet again. I waited until 4, then I decided to check the front again. I didn't open the door, just crept down the hallway toward the entrance and peeked around the corner. Nobody there. I took a few steps out, slowly. The door looked fine. Parking lot was empty. But when I leaned close to the glass to look outside, I saw a small smudge on the bottom part of the door, about knee height. Like a greasy streak from someone's forehead or cheek. And just below that, a faint line of condensation or maybe breath against the metal strip near the floor. I cleaned it off with a paper towel and went back to the office, heart pounding like crazy. At 4:37, the alarm went off again. Then again at 4:50. This time, I didn't check. I just sat in the chair, barely breathing, watching the monitors. At 5:04, the power cut out. Not the whole building, just the front half. Lights in the entryway and over the checkout lanes flickered and went dead. The office still had power, and the cameras were running, but half the store went dark all at once. I almost called 911 right then, but something made me stop. I don't know why. Maybe I still thought I was imagining most of it, or I was worried I'd get in trouble for overreacting. Either way, I just sat there, shaking, watching the front of the store through the camera feeds. And that's when I saw it. Someone crawled into frame. From the left side of the entrance camera, just at the edge of the picture, a figure crawled into view on their hands and knees real slow. Not like army crawling. More like they were trying not to be heard. They stayed low and kept their head down. They moved until they were directly in front of the door, but crouched below the bottom edge of the glass. They just stayed there, not moving. I couldn't see anything but the top of their head, dark, greasy hair, flattened down, and one shoulder. They sat like that for a solid 10 minutes. I wanted to throw up. At 5:23, they stood up. Only I didn't actually see it happen. The camera glitched again, a single second of static, and suddenly they were gone. One frame they were crouched, the next they weren't in the picture at all. I watched the rest of the feed non-stop until the sun came up. The motion sensors didn't go off. The alarm didn't flash again. Just silence. When my replacement showed up at 6, I practically ran out the door. I didn't tell him everything, just said the cameras had been acting up, and there might be someone hanging around outside. I went straight to my car and checked the back seat before I got in. Then I drove home with my hands shaking the whole way. They never caught the guy. I showed the footage to my manager the next day. He shrugged it off and said it was probably a homeless guy messing around. But I know what I saw. I worked nights at this small 24-hour diner just off the highway, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Most of our traffic came from truckers or drunk college kids coming down from the city. On weeknights, though, it was dead quiet after 2 a.m. Usually just me, the fry cook, and maybe a straggler or two who wanted coffee in silence. This happened on a Thursday. It was around 3:15 in the morning. I remember that because I had just checked the time to see how much longer until shift change at 6. The place was empty except for one guy sitting in a corner booth, drinking a coffee he hadn't touched in a while. I figured he was just trying to stay awake. He'd come in maybe 20 minutes earlier. I didn't see what kind of car he came in, just looked up and he was there. He was in his 40s, I think. Clean clothes, shaved, normal enough looking, but I don't know. There was something off about how quiet he was. When I went to take his order, he just said, "Coffee's fine," without really looking at me. No smile. No phone out. Just sat there staring at the tabletop, fingers tapping slow against his mug. That part didn't bother me at first. You get your fair share of loners in a job like that. About 10 minutes after I gave him the coffee, he got up and asked if he could use the restroom. I told him yeah, it was around the corner, just past the payphone no one used anymore. He didn't say thanks. Just nodded and went. I wiped down the counter. Restocked sugar packets. Did a few laps around the floor out of boredom. After a while, I realized I hadn't seen him come back. I glanced over at the booth, coffee still sitting there, cold by now. I went to check the bathroom. The door was shut. I tapped on it and said, "Hey, you good in there?" No response. I waited a second, then knocked again, louder this time. "Sir?" Still nothing. I crouched a little to check the gap under the door and saw shoes. Just standing. Not moving. Not pointed toward the toilet or the sink. Just like someone standing perfectly still, facing the door. I straightened up and knocked again, more forceful now. "Hello? You okay?" Nothing. I felt this weird knot in my stomach. Like something just wasn't right. I headed to the back and got Mike, our fry cook. He was older, kind of grumpy, but solid. I told him some guy was in the bathroom and not responding. He followed me up front, drying his hands on his apron. When we got to the door, the shoes were still there, exactly the same. Like the guy hadn't shifted even an inch. Mike banged on the door with the side of his fist. "Hey, buddy, you sick or something? You gotta answer, man." No sound at all. No cough. No flush. No shuffling. Just that creepy dead silence. Mike sighed, mumbled something, and said he was gonna grab the spare key. We weren't really supposed to open the door unless it was an emergency, but this was definitely crossing into that territory. He disappeared into the back. While he was gone, I stayed by the door. I kept watching those shoes under the gap. They never moved. Then, and I swear I didn't imagine this, I saw something flicker. Like a quick shift in shadow, like he'd moved just slightly. Not enough to say for sure. It could have just been my eyes messing with me, or maybe a car passing by outside. Except there were no cars. The parking lot was still empty, except for my car and Mike's. I walked out to double check. Nothing out there. No lights. No engine sounds. Just dark and quiet. When I came back in, Mike was already unlocking the door. He opened it slow, maybe expecting someone sick or passed out. But the second it swung all the way open, we both froze. The bathroom was empty. No shoes. No guy. The little window near the ceiling was cracked open. One of the tiles on the sink was damp, like someone had rested their hand there. That was it. Mike looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You sure he didn't come out?" I said no. I'd been standing right there. And even before that, I'd been walking the floor. There was no way he slipped past. We checked the kitchen, back hallway, even the walk-in fridge. Nothing. The guy was just gone. Weirdest part? His coffee was still there, full cup. He never drank it. Didn't pay either. Just disappeared. Mike chalked it up to meth head weirdos and went back to the grill, but I couldn't stop thinking about the shoes. How still they were. How long they stood there without moving once. I went to the office and pulled up the camera feed. We had one pointed at the bathroom hallway, another near the front door, and one at the back exit. I fast-forwarded through the last 20 minutes. He walked into the bathroom. Never came back out. No one left through the front. No one used the back. Nothing. I rewound it again. Same thing. He went in and then just never came out. I told Mike, but he brushed it off, said maybe the footage glitched. I knew it didn't. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat behind the counter with a clear view of the hallway. I stayed like that until shift change at 6, checking every few minutes just to make sure the door stayed open and empty. When morning came and the day staff showed up, I told my manager. She looked at the footage, frowned, but didn't say much except, well, he's not here now. She didn't call the cops or anything. Just told me to make sure it was logged in the incident book. A couple nights later, I pulled into the lot for my shift. I was early. Still dark out. As I was walking toward the door, I passed the side of the building where the bathrooms backed up to. There were footprints in the dirt under the window. Fresh ones. Just one set, pacing. Like someone had been walking back and forth. Just outside that tiny window. Waiting. I put in my 2 weeks the next day. I finished them out, didn't want to leave Mike hanging, but I never worked another overnight after that. No one ever saw the guy again. It was around 3:30 a.m. when I finished the last few tasks and turned off the lights at the convenience store. The night shift was always slow and uneventful, but tonight felt a little off. The usual hum of the freezers and coolers filled the quiet space, and the lights flickered once, which made me pause and look up at the ceiling for a second. Just the usual stuff, nothing out of the ordinary. I'd worked here long enough to know the place was secure and predictable, so I didn't think much of it. I locked the doors, made sure everything was in place, and went to grab my stuff from the back locker. The place was empty, as it should be. I was ready to leave. I had that feeling of relief that came with the end of a shift. But when I opened my locker, my stomach dropped. My car keys were gone. I checked the pocket of my jacket. Nothing. I dug through my bag in all the usual places, but they were definitely gone. I thought maybe I had just misplaced them. Maybe they had fallen under something. So I bent down, checked the floor, the shelf, and even behind the locker door, just in case. But no keys. Then I saw it. On the bottom of the locker, sitting there on the cold metal floor, was a single Polaroid photograph. The edges were worn, like it had been handled a lot. The picture was of my house. I could tell because it was taken from the side yard, near the big tree I had planted when I first moved in. The porch light was on, and the windows were lit up, like it had been taken in the evening just after dark. My car was parked in the driveway, the one I drove to work every day, but something about it made my skin crawl. The weird thing was, I wasn't sure how the person who left this knew what my house looked like. The store's in a part of town that's a little off the beaten path, and I lived a good 15-minute drive away, in a neighborhood that wasn't particularly close to anything. I never gave anyone here my address. I didn't talk about my personal life with customers, and I didn't hang out after hours. I kept to myself for the most part. So how did someone know where I lived? I stood there for a second, just staring at the photo. My first thought was that someone had stolen my keys as a prank, but a prank would have ended at the keys, not with a photo of my house in my locker. I picked up the Polaroid and turned it over. There was nothing written on the back, just the blank white space staring back at me. I tried to laugh it off, to brush it off as some sick joke from one of the regulars, maybe someone I didn't even remember talking to, but something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. It felt too deliberate, like whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. I walked back to the front of the store, trying to push the thought out of my head. The front lot was empty, as it should be. The streetlights buzzed faintly in the distance, and there was no sign of anyone lingering around. I didn't hear anything, not even the usual rustle of the wind or the hum of a distant car engine. It was dead quiet. I went outside, locked the store door behind me, and started heading toward my car. But as I was walking across the lot, I glanced toward the corner of the parking lot, the spot closest to the woods. I thought I saw someone standing there, just barely visible in the dim light. My heart skipped. I stopped in my tracks and squinted, trying to make out who it was. They were too far away to see clearly, but something about the posture felt wrong. The person was standing very still, facing me but not moving, almost like they were waiting for me to make a move. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. It was too dark to tell, and the store's lot was pretty secluded, so it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for someone to just be hanging out there. Still, I felt uneasy. I made my way to my car as quickly as I could without drawing attention, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. I checked the rearview mirror before starting the engine, just to make sure no one was behind me, but the lot was empty. The person was gone. I drove home, trying to forget about what had just happened, but it stayed in the back of my mind the whole way. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, and I kept checking my mirrors, just to be sure no one was following me. I got to my house, parked, and locked the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to the Polaroid. How had they taken the picture? How did they know where I lived? Why had they left it in my locker? It felt like a warning, like whoever did it wanted me to know they could get to me whenever they wanted. Around 4 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and tried calling a few friends, but no one answered. I felt stupid, but I had to talk to someone. I didn't know what else to do. I even called my mom for a minute, but it was too late, and I didn't want to worry her. I told myself I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, I went to work, but the whole shift felt off. I couldn't focus, couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. When I went to grab my stuff from the locker, the same spot where I had found the Polaroid was empty. My keys weren't there, and neither was the photo. Whoever took them or left them hadn't returned. The day passed without incident, but I couldn't let go of what had happened. The quiet stillness, the image of my house, and that figure in the parking lot. I couldn't ignore the fact that someone had been watching me. I still don't know who they were or what they wanted, but after that night, I started taking a different route to and from work. I made sure I was never the last one to leave. Nothing else strange ever happened after that, but I've never felt safe at that store again. And every time I pass that spot in the parking lot, I feel that same cold prickle on the back of my neck. I work the late shift at a small convenience store on the edge of town. It's the kind of place that's open 24/7, but most of the customers at night are just people grabbing snacks or a quick drink. I'm used to the quiet. Sometimes it feels like I'm the only one awake in the world. But that night, something was different. It was around 2 a.m. when I first noticed him. He came in quietly, the bell over the door ringing softly as he stepped in. I was behind the counter, flipping through a magazine, barely paying attention. You get used to people coming in and out at all hours, but something about him caught my eye. Maybe it was the way he didn't make any noise when he walked in, he just appeared. He was tall, probably in his late 30s or early 40s, dressed in a plain, faded hoodie and jeans. Nothing about him stood out except for the way he moved. Slow. Too slow. Like he was taking his time, not in a hurry to go anywhere. I didn't think much of it at first. People wander around in here all the time. But then, instead of heading for the aisles like usual, he just stopped. Right in the middle of the store, looking at nothing in particular. Not grabbing anything, not browsing. Just standing there. I went back to the magazine, trying to shake off the weird feeling creeping up on me. It's just a guy, right? Maybe he was waiting for someone. Or maybe he was just tired, needing a break. But then I started hearing the soft shuffle of his feet on the floor. I glanced up again, and he hadn't moved. He was still standing in the same spot, but now he was looking at me. His head was slightly tilted, just enough for me to see his eyes, but not enough to read his expression. It felt like he was staring right at me, like he was trying to figure me out. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable, but tried to act normal. I made a quick joke in my head, telling myself I was being paranoid. It wasn't uncommon for people to get a little weird on late shifts, right? I went back to my magazine again, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I couldn't concentrate. Every time I glanced up, he was still there, just standing, watching. At some point, I stopped pretending I wasn't noticing him. He wasn't going to leave. He wasn't even making a move toward the shelves or the counter. I cleared my throat, figuring I should say something, just to break the tension. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He didn't answer right away. For a long, uncomfortable moment, he just stood there. Then, finally, he nodded, but didn't say a word. He didn't even move. The silence stretched on, and my stomach tightened. There was something off about this. Why was he still here? "Ah, you're just looking around, or..." I added, forcing a small smile, trying to keep the situation light. He didn't respond. He just kept looking at me, his eyes still locked on mine. It was like he was studying me, sizing me up. His gaze didn't flicker for even a second. I could feel my skin start to crawl, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I kept glancing at the clock behind me, watching the seconds tick by, each one feeling heavier than the last. I tried to keep busy, pretending to tidy up a little. Maybe if I moved around, he'd get the hint and leave. But no! He didn't budge. He didn't even flinch when I dropped a can of soda on the counter by accident. I could feel him still watching, though. I could feel it in my bones. I finally just forced myself to look at him again, this time a little sharper, my patience running thin. "Hey, if you're not going to buy anything, you can't just stand there," I said, trying to keep it professional but failing to hide the edge in my voice. Still, no response. He didn't even seem to react to the tone. He just continued standing there, his eyes still on me, unreadable. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't normal. Maybe it was the hour, maybe it was the isolation of the night shift, but something was very wrong. He was too still, too quiet, and he didn't seem to care about anything except being there, right in front of me. I tried again. You need anything? I can help you find something. He finally moved, but only slightly. He shifted his weight, just enough to lean his head a little, still watching me. That was it. No words, no acknowledgement, just that slight movement. I was starting to feel trapped. The store felt smaller, the walls closing in. I reached for my phone under the counter, my hand shaking, but I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? There's a guy just standing in my store? I didn't even know what was happening, and calling the police for something like that seemed extreme. Still, the longer he stood there, the more anxious I got. I glanced at the door. It was too far away to run without him seeing me, and I wasn't about to make a scene. I felt stupid, but I couldn't bring myself to just ask him to leave outright. Something was holding me back, a feeling that if I said the wrong thing, things would escalate in a way I couldn't control. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he broke the silence. You don't recognize me, do you? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I'd been hoping he would leave until that moment. But now, I wasn't sure what he wanted or what he meant. No, I said, my voice barely audible. I don't think so. He stood there for a moment, silent again, before he nodded, like he expected that answer. I just wanted to see if you'd notice, he said, and then he turned and walked out of the store without another word. I stood there, completely still, trying to process what had just happened. I don't know why, but I didn't go outside to check or look around the parking lot. I stayed behind the counter, locked the doors, and sat there, staring at the empty store, too afraid to move. The door had closed with the usual soft chime, but I felt like I was still hearing the echo of his voice in my head. It didn't make sense. Who was he? Why had he said that? He never came back. I don't know if I ever saw him again, but after that night, I started leaving the store a few minutes earlier, just in case. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, somewhere in the shadows. I worked the night shift at a small 24-hour delivery service. It's a pretty standard gig: take calls, enter orders, make deliveries. Nothing exciting. Most of the time, it's quiet, especially after midnight. But a couple of weeks ago, something weird started happening, and it didn't stop until I had no choice but to tell someone. It started on Wednesday, around 2 a.m. I was sitting at the counter, my feet propped up, barely awake, trying to get through another shift. The store was quiet, not much to do. Then the phone rang, and I picked it up, as usual. It was a guy on the other end, asking for a delivery. I didn't think much of it, just another order to enter into the system. Hey, can I get a large pizza and 2 drinks delivered to 1245 Elm Street? He said, giving me the address. I wrote it down and repeated it back. Sure, 1245 Elm Street. What name should I put on the order? It's Dan. Dan Harris. Just put my name on the order. I didn't recognize the name, but that wasn't unusual. A lot of people order food in the middle of the night, and I'd never seen half of them. I entered the order into the system, confirmed everything, and told him it'd be about 30 minutes. Normal stuff. I finished up the call, and a few minutes later, the delivery guy went out with the order. It wasn't anything special, just a normal night, really. But the weird part came the next night. Same time, around 2 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, it was a woman. "Hi, can I get a large pizza and some wings delivered to 1342 Oak Lane?" she asked. I asked her the usual questions, and when I got to her name, she gave me the same answer. "It's Dan Harris. Just use my name." Now, I don't know if it was just me, but something about that name stuck with me. It sounded so familiar, but I couldn't place it. I figured it was just a coincidence. I confirmed everything, entered the order, and sent out the delivery. Again, nothing unusual, right? But then, it happened again the next night. Same time, same routine. Another phone call. This time, a different address, 1956, Pinewood Drive. Same name, though. Dan Harris. By this point, I was starting to get a little curious. It seemed weird to me that someone would keep ordering food from completely different addresses, especially when they were all close to where I lived. Maybe it was a prank. People do stupid stuff like that sometimes, but the addresses were all so close to mine. A few blocks away, at most. I shrugged it off, but then it kept happening. Every night, without fail, another call. And every time, the same name, Dan Harris. And always a new address, but they were all within a few miles of my house. Same guy, same name, different location. I started to feel a little uneasy, but it wasn't like I could stop taking the orders. It was my job, after all. But I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched, like someone was keeping tabs on me. Then, one night, I made the mistake of answering the phone on the third ring instead of the usual fourth. I didn't even check the caller ID. "Hello? Yeah, hey, can I get a delivery to 1245 Elm Street?" "It's for Dan Harris," the voice on the other end said. I froze. My mind was racing. I hadn't even looked at the address yet, but the guy was asking for the same one I'd entered just a few nights ago. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. "Ah, you sure that's the right address?" "I mean, that's not the usual one you give," I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, but I knew my tone had changed. The guy hesitated, and then he said, yeah. Just send it there." Same as always. Dan Harris. Something about the way he said it made me shiver. It didn't feel like just a normal order anymore. It felt deliberate. I wanted to hang up, but I couldn't. I felt stuck. What was I supposed to do? I confirmed the order, and my mind kept racing. I sent out the delivery, but this time, I didn't just sit behind the counter like I usually did. I walked to the back, pretending to do some paperwork. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too weird. It was too specific. Too deliberate. But when the delivery guy came back, he had the same uneasy look on his face. "Weird night," he said, dropping his bag on the counter. I don't know if you've noticed, but those places are all weirdly close to each other. Some of them even look like they're right next to each other. I hadn't said anything to him about it before, but hearing him say that made my stomach twist. He was right. All those addresses were too close. It wasn't normal. "Yeah," I said, trying to brush it off. People do weird stuff. Probably just some kind of prank or something. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a prank. The more I thought about it, the more paranoid I got. The name, the addresses, something about it didn't sit right. The next night, the phone rang again. It was almost like I was expecting it. I braced myself. "Hey, can I get a large pizza to 1320 Willow Street?" "It's for Dan Harris," the voice said. Again, the same guy. Same name. But this time, the address was different. It wasn't even that far from the others, though. I felt my heart race. This was too much. Too many close calls. Too many same names, same addresses. What did he want? Why didn't he just make one order at one address? I don't know what made me do it, but I decided to check the caller ID. The number wasn't blocked. It was a local number, one that I didn't recognize. It sent a jolt of panic through me. What if this wasn't just a prank? What if someone was deliberately trying to get close to me? I canceled the order. I didn't care if I got in trouble for it. I wasn't sending anyone else out there, not with that feeling gnawing at me. I called the delivery service manager and explained everything. The fake orders, the same name, the same addresses near my house. He didn't take me seriously at first, but when I mentioned the local number, he agreed to look into it. 2 days later, I got a call from him. They had traced the number to a burner phone, no record of it being registered to anyone. They told me they'd have someone watch out for it, but they couldn't do much without solid evidence. I never got another order from Dan Harris. But for a while, I felt like someone was still watching, waiting. I don't know who it was or what they wanted, but I knew I wasn't just imagining things. I haven't worked the night shift since, and I don't plan on going back. I worked at a small, local grocery store, pulling the night shift because I needed the extra hours. It was mostly uneventful. There was always a few late-night customers coming in for last-minute snacks, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be handled alone. The store was pretty quiet, aside from the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional beep of the scanner as I rang up whatever people bought. But there was one thing that started happening about a week ago that I couldn't shake. It was subtle at first, like a weird coincidence. The back door of the store is usually locked and alarmed at night. We have to make sure it's secure because the building's in a pretty sketchy area, and the store owners don't take any chances with security. The alarm goes off if the door gets opened or even touched, so there's no way someone can get in without us knowing. But one night, about a week ago, I started hearing something. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me raise an eyebrow. Around 2 a.m., right when the store was the quietest, I heard the distinct sound of the handle on the back door jiggling. I figured it was just the wind or maybe a delivery guy checking the wrong door, so I ignored it. But then it happened again at 3 a.m. I thought maybe someone was out there messing around, but there was no way to get in unless you had the key or knew the code for the alarm. Still, I checked the security camera feed just to make sure no one was loitering near the back. Everything seemed fine. I double-checked the back door, and it was locked like it should have been. No sign of anyone trying to break in. I wasn't sure if I had just imagined the sound or if it was just some weird glitch in my brain from being half awake. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same noise. The handle jiggled, then stopped. It was as if someone was waiting for something. Maybe they were testing to see if the door was locked. It didn't make sense. I figured I was being paranoid. I decided to ignore it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I mentioned it to my coworker, Mike, the next time he came in for his shift. He laughed it off, said it was probably just some raccoon or something. The animals around here get crazy at night, he said, and I wasn't sure if he was serious or just trying to brush it off. Still, I couldn't get it out of my head. Each night, it was like clockwork. At 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., the handle would jiggle. I started staying close to the back, keeping an eye on the camera feed, waiting for something to happen, but nothing ever did. No one ever came through the door. The alarm never went off. The sound just kept repeating, almost like someone was testing the door, trying to find a way in. One night, I decided to check the door myself. I figured if I kept hearing it every hour, I might as well make sure it was still locked. I walked to the back, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty aisles. The door was exactly as it should have been, locked, no signs of forced entry. I checked the handle just to be sure, turned it. It didn't move. I even checked the alarm system. Everything seemed fine. Nothing was wrong. But that night, I heard it again. Right on schedule. The handle jiggled. I froze, my heart pounding. This time, it wasn't just a little rattle. It was a hard shake, like someone was trying to force it open. I grabbed a phone and dialed Mike, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling him twice more, but no answer. He was supposed to be on break, but he wasn't picking up, which only made my anxiety worse. I went back to the back door, keeping my eyes on the cameras. Nothing. The door was still locked, the alarm still set. I felt ridiculous, like I was just letting my mind run wild, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was messing with me. By the third night, I was on edge. I stayed closer to the back, practically glued to the security cameras. I was starting to feel like I was being watched, like someone knew exactly why I was looking away, why I was distracted. Around 2 a.m., I heard the handle again. But this time, it didn't stop. It kept shaking. The sound rattled in my head, too loud to ignore. I grabbed the flashlight from behind the counter and went back to the door. My pulse was racing as I walked toward it, the hallway dark and quiet. I felt like someone was standing right behind me, even though I knew no one was there. The back door was locked as usual. But the more I stood there, the more unsettled I became. The handle had definitely moved. I could feel it in my bones, the same way you feel something in the air before a storm. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something wasn't right. I checked the security footage again, zooming in on the back area. And that's when I saw it. Just for a second, a figure, someone, standing at the corner of the back door, hidden just out of the camera's view. I couldn't make out their face, but they were standing still, just waiting. Waiting for what? I had no idea. I felt my stomach twist. I quickly called Mike again, no answer. I left a message, but I didn't wait around. I went to the back door and locked it again, making sure everything was secure. But even though I knew I'd done everything right, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Someone had been there. That night, the handle rattled like it never had before. It was as if someone was pulling on it, testing it over and over again. I stared at the camera feed, but there was nothing to see. No one visible. Just the door, quietly shaking. I stayed up for the rest of my shift, eyes glued to the screens, hands gripping the counter. By the time Mike finally showed up, I was exhausted. I didn't tell him about what happened, though. He'd just laugh it off like he always did. I didn't feel like hearing it. I was just glad my shift was over, that I was getting out of there. I haven't worked a night shift since. I never figured out what was going on with that back door, but I knew something was happening. Something that I couldn't explain, and something I didn't want to be around when it came to a head. All I know is that I never heard the handle jiggling again after that night. But I still think about it. About the figure I saw in the footage. About the way the door kept shaking, as if someone was trying to get in. I don't know who it was or why they were doing it, but I'm glad I'm not there anymore. I've been working the night shift at this little convenience store for a few months. It's not glamorous, but it gets the bills paid. It's pretty quiet most of the time, which I actually prefer. The store's in a decent neighborhood, but I still keep the doors locked after hours, just in case. I'm usually the only one working the late shift, but sometimes Mike, my coworker, comes in to help. Mike's a bit of a loner, always keeps to himself. But he's a good guy, friendly enough, and we'd chat a little now and then when things were slow. I'd always known he smoked, but it never really bothered me. He'd take his breaks outside, smoke a cigarette, and come back in after a few minutes. Same routine every night. I barely even noticed after a while. One night, though, something happened that made me start looking over my shoulder every time I was alone at the store. It was about 2 a.m. when Mike asked if I minded if he stepped out for a smoke. I told him I didn't care, same as usual. It wasn't like we had any customers coming in anyway, so it wasn't an issue. Mike stepped out through the back door, like he always did, and I went about my business, organizing the shelves, wiping down the counters. I didn't think much of it, but after about 10 minutes, I started to notice the silence. It wasn't that I was used to constant noise or anything, but when you're working the night shift, you get used to sounds, the hum of the fridge, the soft click of the register, the occasional car passing by. But now, there was nothing. I glanced out the window, thinking maybe Mike was still outside. But I couldn't see him anywhere. The parking lot was empty, the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. I figured he was just on his phone or talking to someone. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There, on the pavement, by the back door, was Mike's cigarette. It was still burning, the red ember glowing in the dark. I stared at it for a second, confused. He'd only been out there for 10 minutes, and the cigarette was almost down to the filter. That was quick. I walked over to the door and looked outside. There was no sign of Mike. No one was around. It was like he just disappeared. I stepped out, walked toward the cigarette, and bent down to get a closer look. The thing was still smoking, but there was no sign of Mike anywhere. Not even a fresh drag of smoke in the air. The smell of tobacco lingered, but it was oddly stale, like it had been burning for much longer than I thought. I looked around, hoping to spot him, but nothing. I figured maybe he'd just gone to the corner or something, so I called out for him, but there was no answer. It wasn't like Mike to just vanish, and that made my skin crawl. I stood there for a moment, staring at the cigarette, unsure what to do. I thought maybe he'd had a sudden emergency or something, but why leave his cigarette burning like that? I went back inside, locked the door, and went to check the security cameras. The back lot was visible, so I rewound the footage to when Mike stepped outside. I watched him walk out of the store, take a drag, then nothing. The camera feed just went black for a second. I didn't think much of it at first. Sometimes the cameras glitch. But I rewound it again, checked the timestamps, and it was clear something was off. Mike had been on the screen, and then he wasn't. No one had walked past the camera, no one had come to the back door. It was like he'd just vanished. The cigarette was still there, burning on the pavement, but Mike was gone. I felt my heart beat a little faster as I stared at the screen, replaying the footage over and over, trying to make sense of it. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking if everything was okay. Nothing. It was like he had completely dropped off the face of the earth. I started to panic. I felt stupid for not going out there sooner. What if something had happened to him? What if he was in trouble? I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, waiting, hoping he'd come back. 10 minutes went by. Then 20. Then an hour. The cigarette was long gone by then, burned out completely, but the weird, empty feeling stayed with me. At some point, I decided to call the police. I wasn't sure if they'd take me seriously, but I was seriously freaked out at this point. It wasn't like Mike to disappear without a word. When I explained the situation, they told me to wait and that they'd send someone over, but it felt like forever. I was completely alone in the store now, and the idea that Mike might have just walked off didn't sit right with me. The cops showed up eventually, but they didn't seem as concerned as I was. They asked me the usual questions, if I had any idea where Mike might have gone, if he'd been acting strange recently, that kind of thing. I told them he hadn't seemed off, just his normal quiet self, and that I'd last seen him go out for a smoke. They walked around the back of the store, looked for signs of a struggle, but found nothing. The pavement where Mike had been standing was just bare asphalt, no marks or anything. They told me to keep an eye out and report back if I saw anything unusual. I was left standing there, feeling even more helpless than before. The whole thing just didn't make sense. Where had he gone? Why was his cigarette still burning? And why hadn't anyone heard or seen anything? It didn't add up. Mike wasn't the type to just vanish. It felt like something was watching me, waiting for me to figure out the next step, but there was no answer, just silence. I ended my shift early, locking up the store and making my way home. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see Mike lurking behind me, but of course, there was nothing. Just the sound of my own footsteps echoing through the empty streets. To this day, I still don't know what happened to him. The police never found any trace of him, and I haven't heard from him since that night. I don't work the night shift anymore, and I sure as hell don't go near the back door of that store when it's dark out. Maybe Mike just decided to walk away for whatever reason, but something about that cigarette still burning on the pavement and the way he just disappeared doesn't sit right with me. I just keep thinking, what if he didn't leave on his own? What if he was forced to? I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour convenience store just off the highway, mostly quiet during the late hours except for truckers or the occasional drunk college kid. I usually kept myself busy restocking shelves, cleaning the coffee station, that kind of thing. The phone barely ever rang after midnight, and when it did, it was usually someone asking if we sold rolling papers or lottery tickets. That first call was weird, though. I answered with the usual, "Thanks for calling. This is the Route 9 Express. How can I help you?" There was a pause. Then a man's voice said, "Is Dylan working tonight?" I just kind of blinked. Yeah, this is Dylan." Another pause. No static or anything, just quiet. Then he hung up. I stood there for a second, holding the phone, wondering if it was a prank or maybe a friend messing with me. But nobody I knew really called me at work, and I don't wear a name tag. We don't even have them. Just plain navy polo shirts. I let it go. Figured maybe it was a regular who remembered my name from a past visit. It happens. But then it rang again at 2:12 a.m. Same voice. Same question, "Is Dylan working tonight?" This time I didn't answer right away. I just waited, thinking maybe I could get a better read on his voice. He sounded normal. Not slurred, not weird. Just flat. Calm. No accent I could place. Maybe mid-30s or 40s. After a couple seconds, I said, "Yeah, it's me again." "Who is this?" He hung up. I checked the call history on the screen. Just unknown caller. Nothing useful. I didn't really know what to do with it, so I went back to mopping the floor. At 2:47 a.m., he called again. I picked up and said nothing. He said, "You've got a gray hoodie on tonight, huh?" I was wearing a gray hoodie. I had thrown it on over my work shirt around midnight because the AC was acting up and blowing cold air right above the register. I remember looking down at myself right after he said it, like I needed to double check. "Where are you?" I asked. Click. That time, I walked outside and looked around the parking lot. It was empty except for my car and an old white pickup truck parked across the street, dark inside. No headlights, no movement. I stared at it for a while, but nothing happened. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? Some guy kept calling and then hanging up. Creepy, yeah, but not illegal. I made a mental note to ask my boss to check the security cameras in the morning, just to see if someone was hanging around outside. At 3:19, the phone rang again. I picked up and kept my voice steady. "You've got 30 seconds to explain who you are, or I'm calling the cops." He didn't speak right away this time. I could hear something in the background, like a buzzing light fixture or maybe a fan. Then he said, "You didn't check the back door." I froze. I had done trash and cardboard runs earlier in the night, but I hadn't walked out back since around midnight. I always locked the back door after dumping the trash. Habit drilled into us after a couple break-ins months ago, but I hadn't checked it since. I didn't say anything. I just put the phone down and walked quickly but quietly toward the storage room, where the back door was. The hallway light was flickering motion sensor, and it clicked on as I passed under it. I stopped about 5 feet from the door. There was a shadow under the bottom edge. Just a faint sliver, like someone was standing right outside. Not moving. Just standing there. I couldn't see feet or anything, just a slight dark outline where the light from inside met the edge of the threshold. I backed up slow, keeping my eyes on the floor. The phone rang again. I didn't pick it up this time. I just walked back to the front counter and locked the main doors. I turned off the outside lights, which we usually kept on for customers, and shut off the interior ones except for the register area. I crouched behind the counter and dialed non-emergency police. Told them someone might be trying to get in, that they knew my name and clothes, and that I thought they were out back. The dispatcher said someone was already in the area and would swing by. While I was waiting, I watched the cameras. There were 4, front parking lot, back door, register area, and one pointed at the aisle between the drink coolers and chips. I flipped to the back door feed. The screen was black. Just black. Like the lens was covered. I blinked and tapped the monitor. Nothing changed. I switched it off and back on. Still nothing on the back camera, just darkness. The front lot was empty, but the white pickup truck was still parked across the street. Same spot. No lights, no movement. I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. The aisle cam was normal. Register cam showed me crouched down, barely visible in the corner of the screen. Then I saw the back door handle move. Not on the feed, like I said, that one was black. I heard it. Just a light rattle, like someone was testing it. It wasn't violent. Just a slow, almost polite check. Then it stopped. The whole store felt silent. No hum from the coolers. No buzz from the soda machine. Like everything just held its breath. I stayed behind the counter until I saw red and blue lights flash across the front windows. I stood up and unlocked the door for the officer. He was alone, younger guy, seemed pretty chill but alert. I explained everything about the calls, the gray hoodie comment, the back door, the broken camera. He asked if I had the number. I showed him the unknown caller log, which didn't help much. He and I went out back together. The door was still locked, and there was nobody there. But the camera mounted above the back door had been sprayed with black paint. Just a small circle, right over the lens. There were fresh cigarette butts on the ground near the back wall. Maybe 7 or 8. And a small folding chair leaned against the wall. I hadn't seen that earlier when I took the trash out. We didn't keep one back there. The cop took a few pictures and told me to keep the doors locked the rest of the shift. He said he'd stick around the area until sunrise, maybe do a couple passes by the store. After he left, I called my boss and told him I wasn't staying the rest of the shift. I locked up and left around 4:30, right after a delivery truck dropped off milk and bread. I was supposed to check it in, but I just left it stacked by the front. I don't know if the guy in the pickup was the same one who called or the one out back, or both, but when I drove past it, it was gone. No tire marks, nothing. I worked a couple more night shifts after that, but I kept a bat behind the counter and left the outside lights off every time. The calls never came again. But sometimes, when I walked out back to take out the trash, I'd see a fresh cigarette butt by the wall. Just one. Still warm.